And I'm actually speaking to you from I'm speaking to you today actually from a hotel room. I think this is my first hotel room since well over 2 years. So it's like I have to remember how to travel. It's kind of a anxious time after 2 years of no travel. But so that's why my background is a whole lot cleaner than usual, because I didn't have to worry about my messy desk. So I'm wearing a pink shirt. I have, let's see, brown and gray hair, streaked, and pronouns are she, her, and hers. And all is good. So as we still have people trickling in, so just a reminder, calls coming up. We have with the World Institute on Disability presenting and speaking to us in June on their emergency work and their work on climate resilience. And Dawn Skaggs will be speaking on that call. In July, we have Megan, or no, not Megan, we have Lisa Austin from CFILC, and she's going to speak about the use of batteries for power saving, life supporting, life sustaining devices in terms of, what have we learned since our public safety power outages, and where are we going in the world of batteries? What are we looking at over the next 5 years? What should we plan for? How will things improve in terms of our own backing up systems? In August, we have Anthony Imparato. He's the executive director of Disability Rights California. That's the protection and advocacy organization in California. And he's going to talk about the work of the Presidential COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force that he was appointed to, and they had a final report that came out from the White House with a lot of action items and recommendations. So we're going to do a catch up with him on what's happening with all of those recommendations. Are they being implemented? Where exactly are they? And in September, it's still on the drawing board, but I think we'll have a call focused on what does our future look like in terms of power outages. What have we learned overall in terms of our safety, and what do we need to implement from a individual level, public policy level, a regulatory level, legislative level, and that kind of thing. So Russell usually does an update at this point on our fourth Thursday of the month calls, but they are in pause right now because Russell has left CFILC, and they are in the process of hiring a new person for that position. So those fourth Thursday of the months are on pause for the moment. Just a reminder, at the end of this call, Anthony will post a poll for today's session. And any of you who can't access that poll, we'll also post a Survey Monkey link for you to use. So Anthony, back to you for a minute to give us the accessibility briefing.
Yeah, thank you, June. Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony. I'm a program coordinator at CFILC. Just a visual description, I'm an Asian American male in my early 20s with black hair, wearing glasses and a polo shirt. My background is just an office with the city view, and welcome to the topic call. So if you would like to gain access to captioning, please head to the meeting controls at the bottom of the Zoom screen, select the CC icon labeled as live transcript, and then you will click the show subtitle to gain access to captioning. Similarly, there is a stream text link in the chat, and that allows you to adjust the size, font, and colors of the words being typed by our wonderful captioner, Rhonda. And at this time, we're asking that you use a chat box for networking, interacting, and asking questions. You can also use the raise your hand icon to get our attention for questions or concerns. And I'll pass it back to you, June. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. So just a reminder, we learn lots from you, so your feedback is welcome, both in chat and in the poll. And if you'd like to email me, I'll post my email and chat as well. So Kathy, introduce yourself, your name, your organization, anything else you want to say about yourself. We'll keep an eye on chat. So as Anthony said, feel free to use it also for your questions as they come up. Okay, so today we're in for a real treat. We're going to hear about the partnership for inclusive disaster strategies. And we've got both co-executive directors, Shaylin Sluzalis and Germán Parodi. They're co-executive directors. And for those of you who aren't aware, the partnership is a disability-led focus group on equity for people with disabilities and for people with access and functional needs before, during, and after disasters. And I've been involved with the partnership since its inception and know it well, and have worked with both Shaylin and Germán for well over 2 years. Matter of fact, I think we've probably broken some kind of record together. And I think I've spent more executive days on calls with these two people, weekends, holidays, you name it, than most anyone else I can think of in my life. I think we've broken some kind of new record that we'll probably have to file for that, since we definitely have a record. So, but I have a lot of respect for both of these individuals, and they're going to fill us in today on their history of the partnership, what their staffing looks like, what the current projects are looking like, what's their vision for the future, goals for the next 2 or 5 years, and how we can help. So over to both of you, take it away. And we'll save plenty of time for questions afterwards. They'll talk for about 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up. But feel free to use chat.
Thank you so much, June, for having us. And it's good to be with you all in California today. I think it's almost maybe as sunny here in Philadelphia as hopefully it is in your neck of the woods. And thank you so much, June, for that lovely introduction. My name is Shaylin Sluzalis.
My name is Germán Parodi.
I'll give a description of myself. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a younger woman with light skin complexion, with long brown curly hair, wearing a white shirt that has black border. And behind us is a desk that's kind of messy, but hopefully you can't see it too much, with a background, a floral background.
And I'm a Puerto Rican brown-skinned man. I'm sitting in my wheelchair wearing a purple long sleeve shirt, my brown hair pulled back.
And as June mentioned, we are the co-executive directors of the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. We'll share a little bit about ourselves and how we got here at the partnership, as well as then the history of the partnership. Germán and I both come from independent living backgrounds. I was raised in a center for independent living growing up. My older sister has disabilities, and I also recently have been identifying with my own disabilities, but really came to independent living, disability rights background through my advocacy at home with my sister, as well as through growing up at the local Center for Independent Living in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is in rural north central Pennsylvania.
I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and in 2017, I was a victim of a carjacking. I was shot in the neck. I'm a quadriplegic. In 2004, along with my grandmother, we moved to Philadelphia with family members and very quickly connected with the Center for Independent Living here, worked throughout the years in advocacy, information referral, peer support, skills training, and really with a focus then on systems advocacy. Did along the years a lot of organizing work with ADAPT in the state, in the city, and nationally. In 2017, after many years of advocacy work throughout housing systems, advocacy around education work, accessible transportation, housing, and not only accessible housing, but affordable integrated housing. In 2012, we collaborated in Philadelphia with the Authority Department to create its first disability-focused hotline, which had not existed before, to receive ADA-related complaints. Forwarding to 2017, when Shaylin and I met at an ADAPT protest in DC, in the late summer of 2017, Hurricane Maria impacted Puerto Rico. It was the catastrophic disaster, Category 5, over 12 hours, sustained winds, over 150 miles throughout the entire island. Catastrophic events, something that, as you're in California, well know, dealing with a grid system, electric grid system, sometimes they're its own whims. Maria was a catastrophe on the electric grid, where today up to 1 million people at a time are getting unannounced blackouts, sometimes just due to 30-40 mile winds on the electric grid area. We saw directly the discrimination, point blank, that people with disabilities receive during emergency management and response, and the inequities. Something we'll talk more at the end is that we not only then just it refocused our life's work from the local level supporting, but to the top level, making sure that we change systematic federal rules, like allowing Medicaid to cross state lines, an issue that affected hundreds of thousands during Maria, and it continues every disaster, as you know. And a need for disability and disasters, technical assistance and research centers focus, which we'll talk more later.
As Germán mentioned, in 2017 is when Germán and I got involved in inclusive emergency management, being deployed to Puerto Rico as first responders with a team of disability leaders. And from there, the rest is history. We've been involved ever since. It's where we have met June and others like Marcy Roth, Todd Holloway, and many more have become peers and our mentors in this work. And really thankful, June, for all of your support throughout. And certainly we'll touch upon our world record that I think are breaking, and we'll share more about that for folks as well.
One thing that we have been able to be a theme of ours that we, along a number of our pillars, is educating in not only our community, but emergency management personnel. People with disabilities are first responders. We're not just a vulnerable community, and integrating us in planning, exercising, response, recovery, mitigation, it's integral to making and using the opportunities that disasters create in creating a more accessible world for all of us. Every time there's a disaster, there is reconstruction, and it needs to be accessible. With that, I hold a United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction advocacy position with the Office of Disaster Risk Reduction as the focal point. I'm on my second term. Now, along Marcy Roth, we are the core focal points for people with disabilities in North America for the DRR UN office.
And also, just to add to our personal background, we're both board members of APRIL, the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living, and also co-chairs of the Consortium for Constituents with Disabilities, CCD, Emergency Management Task Force, and just local engagement throughout, but also from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. But to take us back just a little bit, more history on the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, also as we say the partnership, it's a little less of a mouthful, was founded by Portlight Strategies in 2016. And Portlight has led humanitarian response and relief initiatives to meet the needs of disaster impacted disabled communities previously for nearly 20 years. And the partnership was founded to focus on the disability inclusive emergency management areas, community organizing, policy change, systems advocacy, and training with technical assistance. And our first executive director, founding executive director, and now board member of the partnership, folks may be familiar with Marcy Roth, was leading the partnership during the first several years, where we were able to activate our disability and disaster hotline in response to Hurricane Harvey, where Herman and I were deployed to Puerto Rico, and responding to Hurricanes Michael and Florence in 2018. And then in 2019, we had the leadership change where Marcy is now the executive director of the World Institute on Disability, and we work very closely with one another as partner organizations. And the partnership not only has Herman and I as the leadership change, but also became its own 501c3 independent of Portlight Strategies, and really starting to robust and create our infrastructure and organizing our capacity. And with that, right as Herman and I became the co-executive directors at the end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020, we deployed 3 times to the Bahamas following Hurricane Dorian. And with that, also at the beginning of 2020, seeing the impacts of the earthquakes in Puerto Rico, continuing our support and being able to see the impact of community capacity building between Hurricane Maria in 2017 and the response to the earthquakes in 2020. And that the local response, including Centers for Independent Living, including disability-led organizations and other community-based organizations in that response at the Emergency Operations Center, made a very significant difference in the response and prioritizing the rights and needs of people with disabilities in Puerto Rico. And then, as we all know, at the beginning of 2020, COVID-19 hit the United States. And we at the partnership, as we do during any disaster, reach out to the local communities being impacted, particularly disability-led organizations and other parties, and bringing together emergency managers, public health officials, and bringing everyone to the same table to address specifically the needs of people with disabilities in those communities. We knew COVID-19 was not going to be just a local centralized response or disaster, but would affect everyone across the nation and around the world. So we came together to really bring our expertise, our lived experience, our known knowledge of the gaps in response for people with disabilities, and put together a call to action, really to address the governments to make sure that continuity of operations plans were in place for services and programs, and making sure that people with disabilities were not being left behind in the response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. And we met for several days around this call to action, and it was released. We sent it to the White House task force at the time, sent it across the country. Several hundreds of organizations and individuals signed on in support. And since then, since February 28th of 2020, when we began that organizing call.
And we sent a letter to the White House on March 3rd, very quick turnaround.
Since that time frame, we have been meeting, as June alluded to at the beginning, each and every day throughout this public health emergency to really address the needs, come together as supporters, peer support for one another, sharing information and daily updates, bringing together local and national and federal entities with community-based organizations and disability advocates locally on a daily basis, and continues each and every day at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is 3 p.m. Pacific time. And certainly folks are always welcome to join us. We're always welcoming new folks and happy to have others join us when you can and are able to. It's a safe space to really come and talk about the needs and ongoing issues that we continue to face, the gaps in the response, and how we can strategize on a local level to the national level on these systems advocacy issues.
This call also serve as cross-pollination of knowledge and skills. We have colleagues from the American Red Cross at the national level join us daily, providing high-level insights on disasters and COVID-19 overall response. And they support us in navigating the complex changes that have been coming almost on a daily, frequent level on the science updates. We also have colleagues join us from the Department of Human Services, ACL.
The Administration on Community Living from Health and Human Services.
And from CRCL.
The Department of Homeland Security, Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties.
We want to make sure we don't have to give into that acronym jargon mentioned early on. And lastly, we have a colleague that joins frequently throughout the week from the CDC. And we are able to just advocate and attempt to assure that as policies are coming out, they attempt to be as accessible as possible.
And in addition to these community organizing calls and bringing folks together, trying to bridge that gap in emergency response and people with disabilities and disability-led organizations, since the partnership's inception, the partnership has also been holding weekly national stakeholder calls with a very similar focus, bringing across the nation folks together on a weekly basis to really address the needs and rights of people with disabilities in preparedness and response and recovery. And I'll put some information in the chat in a moment on how you can join us in those community calls if you're interested, and how to reach us more on that. And to share a little bit about us internally at the partnership, since COVID-19 has kind of forced us all to stay home for several years now, it gave us at the partnership an opportunity to really strengthen our capacity, strengthen our infrastructure, and grow it so that it's not just a couple people rowing all of the boats, but that it is a whole team together working on these issues. And certainly we then have a wide network of supporters and allies that help us with the ongoing work across the nation. We have a small team, a small but mighty team, as I say. We have a Director of Operations, Melissa Marshall, who has a JD and focuses a lot on legal rights and needs of people with disabilities and how the ADA and other disability civil rights laws apply and are not waived during disasters and emergencies. We have a new Director of Communications, Jean Grover, who helps us make sure our word gets out in a clear, interesting and visual way for folks and accessible for people, all types of disabilities. We have Priya Penner as our Executive Assistant, who helps us get all of the things done. As you know, you always need someone that does a little bit of everything, and Priya is that person for us. And then we also, and we'll talk a little bit more about our response in collaboration to the response to Ukraine and the Russian invasion in Ukraine, but we do have a focal point for that response, Anna Landre, who folks may be familiar with the name. She's been quite publicized recently in media outsourcing from this response. And as I mentioned, and we'll mention a little bit more, our Disability and Disaster Hotline has a manager, Colleen Roche, who helps us address the needs that come in across the nation and connecting people to resources locally. And then also for a project, we have Regina Dighton as our equity consultant and Liam Marshall Butler, who helps us on a volunteer basis with ongoing support and resources in little areas. And then we have a wide network of folks that come together on our community engagement calls that are just interested in these issues and need to come together and address them or have technical assistance. We have a wide family network, as we like to say, and folks are always welcome. We have a partners site, partners page on our website, and I'll put that in the chat for folks that may be interested in being listed as a partnership partner.
We offer an array of community resilience building services that we provide to Centers for Independent Living, already for activities that have been approved by ACL, community-based organizations, public health departments and emergency management agencies, private institutions. It's more information that we'll send along to you for your review later on. We've talked for a while now. I'm sure we can keep on talking for another hour. We've said a lot of things. We want to give space for conversations, and as we go through them, we'll provide more input.
Yeah, just a reminder, thank you. Feel free to raise your hand or post your questions in chat. You both have not been very busy. I can tell you have a lot of time on your hands.
Good one, June.
Hey, June, this is Todd. Not so much a question, but just encouraging people, especially in California on the West Coast. The state of Washington really benefited, not only during the pandemic, but from before the pandemic in our work with the partnership. I work for a Center for Independent Living in Washington State, and we have a coalition under Jim House, which is statewide. And the partnership did work with us that was instrumental in us having continuity of operations plans for all of our IL centers. We are now getting ready to be fully involved with our national level exercise, Cascadia Rising 22, and Jim will be having an entire day set aside to make sure that our stand-up policies are complete and accessible, and that the network of people that we connect with have a great policy in place to be able to do that. All of that is, I can say with all sincerity, is due in part to the relationship that we have struck with this partnership. And I encourage any of you, even if you spend the majority of your time with one coalition or organization, board, committee, advisory, or another, to partner, connect as a partner with the partnership so that we can share and as a united front be able to spread the resources so that everyone does well, as we all I think match the mission, vision, and values of the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. So big hats off to my folks there. Those directors, I tease them a lot that they never sleep, and I'm pretty convinced of that. They work very hard.
Well, my name is David Porter, and I work with Santa Clara County. They are trying to put together another disaster fund, but if you had the experience where none of the key people are showing up to any of these Zoom calls, because none of the people in Santa Clara County are showing up to any disaster planning call that we try to encourage them to come on. And what do if they don't show up?
Okay, thanks, David. Shaylin, did you get David's question?
heard most of it, but wasn't able to get the question.
And this is Todd, June. It sounded like one that we're running across all the time, and that is caregivers and people that are helping if you're living in a community-based setting. Is that correct, David? Having them not show during the pandemic has been deadly.
Yeah, exactly. And also these emergency planning people, they don't take into account people with disabilities at all.
Got it. Thanks, Todd, and thanks, David. Back to both of you for response.
Well, this is Germán. David, the issue, I mean, I'm a quadriplegic. I also was receiving services. And I think I have not only Shaylin, we live together, but I have all these family members that live with me. So that my network of services have been able to quarantine it, if you will, but it is an issue and nationwide. And luckily, I would say that in California, and I'm sure Judah and others will have more to say, you have a long-standing managed care system, and they have responsibilities. Surely, not many have been calling them out because the issue has started since the beginning of the pandemic, but advocating on a daily basis is the problem is not only yours, and maybe they need to compensate and offer better incentives to people to do the work that's needed to be done. Problem solving in such ways. There is no need when people at McDonald's and Amazon warehouses are getting paid $20, $25 an hour for our workers that are, doing life-saving work, in my personal opinion, not to be compensated, and not only economically, but in benefits as well.
Yeah, because in Santa Clara County, the caregivers get paid like only $15 an hour, and that wage only went up a couple months ago. And it's like, dude, we can barely get people that really, most of these people think it's a babysitting job, basically, to take care of somebody with disability. And they have language difficulties, the whole gamut. And when you add that on top of it, it's a nightmare.
Good point, David. This June, I think you've actually given me an idea for a future call, because this is really a multi-layered problem that we have, with many people needing to take more responsibility. So we need to do a whole call on this, focus in terms of, direct service workers, the role of IHSS, the role of managed care in terms of, backup emergency services, salary, wage, all kinds of things that contribute to the problem. So thank you.
Because I'll give you an example. I had COVID back about 2 years ago, and I had to have, my friends come in and give me a hand, because there was a lot of my workers that did not want to come in. And when you add that, and there's a disaster, you can add, that could be dazzling. And then there's a disaster.
Right, David, disaster upon disaster, particularly when you yourself had COVID and still had to struggle with, having people who didn't want to come in. Yeah. That's a rough go.
Yeah.
Any other questions so far? Well, I have one question for both of you, and then you can keep going. I know you have more to say, but given your diverse activities, and what would you say, and since you took the realm with partnership, both of you, what would you point to as your biggest impacts to date? And I realize it's not an easy question.
Today, not to date, but today.
No, to date, I go looking over the past, whatever you want. It's yours to have.
I want to answer today, and then we can go back to date. But all of our accomplishments and learnings and community building to date has led to today for us to being able to support a women disability Ukrainian group with disabilities, fight for right, support people with disabilities in Ukraine evacuate from the war in collaboration through our Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration that we co-funded with your neighbors in California and Berkeley, the World Institute on Disability with Marcy Roth and colleagues of ours in Chile, ONG Inclusiva, and GADRA. We've been able to support Fight for Right 2 days after the war began. Since February 26th, we've been able to now support over 1,000 people with disabilities to safety out of the war. And we are in communication with over 3,000 people with disabilities, supporting them in sheltering in place and evacuating to safety. It is an unprecedented activity for disability-led organizations to take a leading role in humanitarian action during active war. It's never happened before. We are in daily communication and very weekly through frequent communications with multiple United Nations offices, including protection clusters that are active in the war. And to this point, people with disabilities throughout all the systems are being forgotten, are being ignored, and not only doing the response, but the advocacy simultaneously is an unprecedented achievement, June.
Thank you. I think Shaylin posted the link in a chat related to your website. And I think from that link, those of you who wish can access some of the webinars related to the actual work. People are actually doing the work in the trenches. And as I participated in those webinars, they are quite impactful and impressive in terms of thinking about surviving these apocalyptic events as people with disabilities. So I highly recommend you listen to some of those webinars.
This is Germán. Thank you, June. And there you will also see a Al Jazeera special. Shaylin mentioned earlier our Ukraine focal point, Anna Landre. It's a half-hour special, big time for it, but you also hear from Yulia Sashak, the lead of Fight for Right, and a fellow, forget his name, colleague of a different organization in Ukraine supporting people with disabilities. So encourage you to take time to view them, and don't hesitate to reach out if any questions, support, queries. And as Shaylin mentioned, we do meet daily at 3 p.m. your time, primarily on the COVID-19 disability rights calls, where we do cover concurrent disasters, and we're there. We'll answer your questions as they come in.
Just a reminder for those of you who are feeling a little shy, put your questions in chat, or you can raise your hand. And in my version of Zoom, raising your hand is under reactions, and there's a little thing that says raise hand, and that's how you do it on my version. I've learned there are so many different versions, you never know what's on the bottom, what's on the top. So, or just pipe in.
Yes.
I'll add over the last 2 years, 2.5 years almost, highlights around being able to have the first experience seeing our disability community survive disasters, seeing it in Puerto Rico, seeing it in the Bahamas, personally, not only supporting remotely, and seeing the resilience building that happens thereafter. The Center for Independent Living, MAVI in Puerto Rico, had not done much engagement with emergency management prior. Afterwards, it's become one of their pillar activities, and in the earthquake of in January 2020, hundreds of people who don't have assistive technology, durable medical equipment to evacuate, thus making them homebound or bedridden. Hundreds being able to be prioritized and focused for evacuation, something that would have not been able to happen prior. In the Bahamas, working with Howard Bowe and Aaron Brown with the university in the Bahamas, people with disabilities. Then afterwards, acknowledging and feeling empowered and recognizing, yes, we all know climate change, climate crisis, extreme weather events are here and in the future. People with disabilities are the most impacted. We know people with disabilities are injured or die 2 to 4 times more likely than people without disabilities. This is a statistic that comes from the United Nations data research that was gathered and understood after the Fukushima earthquake disaster. Since then, being able to create it's such an acceptance culture. We help anybody. We in a matter of disasters, in a matter of emergency, human life and lesson of injury is the priority. Following the Sendai framework, which is the compendium for disaster response worldwide, based on the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office, we've been able to, create an environment in empowering people with disabilities where we're not just vulnerable. I may be more vulnerable to the system's response because they were made inequitable. I can be part of the response. When I am part of the response as a person with a disability, more lives will be saved, less injuries will take place. Thus, through our work, being able to be recognized, we are now listed as a response partner on the FEMA website. We are listed as a response partner on the CDC website, and we're working with a different, it's emergency partners, inclusive response group called EPIC. It's a CDC specific group that works on emergency preparedness and response. Being able to work with HHS's ASPR, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, and letting them know we at the partnership are the nation's disability-led organization solely focused on disasters and emergencies. It is not a program, it's not an activity, it is our mission and our focus, and we collaborate with all that want to work in this field. I believe that distincts us and highlights us from others, June.
I agree. I don't think anyone else holds that those descriptors anywhere. Other questions?
Hey, June.
You mentioned Puerto Rico. Oh, Todd, sorry. Are you on? Todd?
Yeah, I'm here, June. But I Cindy, did you have your hand up, or were you just clapping?
No, I did have my hand up. I just wanted to share some things that
Please.
we're doing here in Northern California.
Go ahead, Sydney.
Okay, well, as everybody knows, in Northern California, we are now at the brink of our wildfire season. It just boggles my mind that we have a season called wildfire season, and we have had multiple people. Well, we have lost whole towns in our area. Our regional center is really on top of what they can do to assist people. We have one. Oh, I'm sorry, Todd. Okay, so they have a a mobile unit that is loaded with things that they need in an emergency situation for all types of disability and medical needs. They have went to emergency sites and set up, for instance, I'll give you one example. When we had the car fire years ago, they went to one area where the evacuation zone was set, and then that was moved because the fire got too close to that. So it was at our Shasta College, and they had one area that was set up as a quiet zone for people with autism, because it's just evident that they have a lot of sensory issues. So that was amazing that they set that up. We have all different kinds of programs in our area that set up for transportation. I work with a team of people with disabilities. There are 2 people on the team currently that provide free emergency preparedness presentations, not only for their peers, but for anyone in the community. They have given that presentation to churches. They've given that presentation to homeowners associations. They have given that presentation to their peers for senior living complexes. And every time we have a fire, it seems like we morph the presentation a little bit. They just gave the presentation the other day to a day program, because there are people who live independently. There are people who live in care homes. And matter of fact, they've done the presentation for complete care homes, one house at a time. And
Cindy, I wanted to ask you, these are great to hear about, but did you have any specific questions at this point for Germán or Shaylin? And we'd like to hear more at some point.
No, I thought they would be interested that we are doing things in our area to get people ready. But the biggest barrier that I see, and maybe they can give me some tips with this, the thing that I worry about, one, is people with disabilities who live independently that don't have transportation, because we have ILS and SLS and all those organizations that can help people. But if those people are then assisting their own family to get out of the way of wildfire, then I just worry about people. In the presentation that we give, we tell people, don't wait, make connections with your neighbors. So if your ILS or SLS people can't get to you, you have a local
ILS, could you just let us know? It sounds like your question about transportation for people who don't have ready resources to get out in. But just before we give the question to both of them, want to make sure we don't leave people behind by not knowing the abbreviations. So ILS,
independent living skills and supported living.
Supported living, SLS.
Yes, supported living services. And
Okay,
then
from
there
the
are the
regional
people.
center?
Yes, through the regional center.
Okay.
And then there are people who just live on their own that don't have transportation.
Okay, so transportation question for where there aren't many assets. So great question, hard question. So over to you both, Germán, Shaylin.
This is Germán, and I think Cindy alludes to, we need to have many more of these types of conversations. I think David did as well allude to this. Cindy, no, you said the solution. Talk to your neighbors. Let's thread that out. The concept of tabletop exercises, of conversing and exercising. What are you gonna do?
Oh, that is such a great, easy solution.
With everybody, making that part of the IL skills training activity with everybody in one-on-one focus groups. What are we gonna do when the disaster happens? Who are you calling first? What happens when that person doesn't arrive? Second option, third option, fourth option. So at least there's a understood, realistic expectation of what to do. and you can better identify what are those gaps that you need to fill. Maybe, yes, I may need to prepare of what am I going to do for 24, 36 hours alone. And I cannot transfer out of my bed if someone doesn't come into my house.
Yes.
And the people that come into my house have the keys, and maybe they cannot come to me. So who else is going to have the key near me if nobody else can get, because of transportation, disaster to my house? Thinking that through with every person is a very individualized activity, but I think that's the start.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that, because we just started the other day, matter of fact, Tuesday. One of the ladies has conversation with the audience while the other team member is setting up all the technology, the PowerPoint and the computer and everything. That could be one of the things that she could talk to the audience about. Just kind of do some role play as an icebreaker to get people to talk, because people don't ask questions.
And this is something, Cindy, it's an activity that we support. A number of SILs and others do. You do want to have facilitators that are, like June, extremely well familiar with the topic, to be able to navigate what are understood not too good practices like the buddy system, or registries, and only waiting for the registry to come and help you, and what are better practices as we're discussing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the regional center has some of that, but when we personally had to evacuate our home, it was like I went brain dead. I call it adrenaline poisoning. And unless you have something that you've practiced over and over and over, and I do think I do a pretty good job, but when that time comes, it's amazing how much that you don't remember, and that but the adrenaline just knocks out of your brain. So I think having those conversations, and maybe we can encourage the programs that those people attend to occasionally have those conversations.
So I want to make sure we honor who's in
Awesome.
chat.
Thank you.
These are great comments, Cindy. So don't go away, and let's keep digging at the issue, because it is a significant issue. So Andrea says, does your co-social services sheriff office keep a list of people who are medically, electrically dependent, need assistance to evacuate? And then the other comment is, keep a lockbox with front door key in it. You can give the helper, rescuer, the combination over the phone. So Herman, Shaylin, comments on those?
Real quick on the second comment, it's a first good idea, Andrea, and not a bad plan, but then plan for what would happen if there is no cell communication for the person to communicate. What is that? And just continuing to thread out the what ifs, what about. I'm not directly familiar with the co-social service sheriff, but it sounds like a registry. Many special, quote unquote, special needs registries exist across the country for different types of needs. We have learned relying on said registries create a false expectation. We have not found a promising example anywhere in the country, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of said registries that are actively used in a measurable manner in an active disaster. So I will call my fire personnel, tell them I'm a quadriplegic. If I don't have someone that comes helps me, I will need you to come and break down my door and help me out my house. Let's say there's a block fire. It's not a major disaster, it's a local emergency. Somebody's going to call 911. Do you think that as they're on their way, they're going to see this registry of 1 million people that we have in Philly? You have much larger communities in throughout California, and even small communities. Are they going to get on their way? What are my needs? They're going to know that someone's here. And if I scream out of the top of my lungs, they're not going to hear me outside. So navigating this complexity is why it's needed to have a support network, as Cindy was earlier alluding to, and not just relying on said registry, because so far they have let us down. And the worst case scenario is that people will die waiting for support.
I would add, Herman, I think your points are well taken, that it's a whole lot easier to have what I call magical thinking, that somebody else is going to help me do this. And there's going to be this great registry with a stellar response record. And if somebody has done the research for decades, I can tell you if they do not exist. But your point about helpers and, helper networks, the real key is that they're close and they can respond quickly. And the lockbox is interesting, but I think Herman nailed it when he said what happens when there's no cell phone, or these people have to have the combination ahead of time or the key, because you never know when your cell tower is going to go down, because their battery backup, unknown to many, can be only 4 hours. So it's your point about doing the difficult, disturbing work of thinking about who's going to be there to help you. And it might be a neighbor that you might need to just get them know a whole lot better than you have.
A whole lot better. I see a comment on the chat about not always being able to rely on friends or neighbors, and I agree. It is a concept of building, the concept of your chosen family, going not just a known person, but that close relationship is in the local level of disaster. You need to plan for it, and it is something to think about. I know we're nearing on time, and I know Dawn has had her hand up, or their hand up.
Hi guys, I just wanted to comment on Cindy's thing too. I had a comment earlier that may have been missed. My master's project was specific to emergency planning for people with developmental disabilities. I am in charge of the DIDAR program, Disability Disaster Access and Resources program for Humboldt and Trinity counties. And I actually have done outreach to Far Northern Regional Center in the past, and just a few months ago actually, and I've never heard back from anyone there. There is a DIDAR program in your area as well. You can, whether or not you qualify for medical baseline, you can sign up for the Vulnerable Citizen Registry with PG&E, which is people who are vulnerable but not necessarily qualify for medical baseline, and you can receive heads up information from them about active events in your area. But also the Disability Disaster Access and Resources program doesn't just give out batteries to people with medical devices. We do emergency planning with clients that is individualized as well. And in the past, I have done 2-day workshop trainings in Humboldt Lake, Mendocino, and Del Norte counties to teach people who serve regional center clients and vulnerable populations exactly how to make those emergency plans. And next time I come through that area, if in my earlier message, I gave you my personal cell phone and email, I would be happy to schedule a time to meet with you and help you hash out an emergency plan that works for you, but also reach out to the DIDAR in your area, even if you don't have a medical device that runs on electricity, just so that you can see what other options they have to support you. I, as a DIDAR leader here, have a memorandum of understanding with North Bay Transit, who also exists in Reading. And so when we had like our power outages here, there was one gentleman who was a recent double amputee and had no transportation, and we were able to provide him with wheelchair transportation and a hotel room stay and food vouchers, and return him home after stopping by the pharmacy to get his meds on the way, and did check-ins and took care of his cat the whole time he was evacuated, and gave him daily updates on the status of his cat. So there might be a little more available out there than you realize, and I would be happy if anyone wanted me to come and do some outreach or communications or a little workshop or presentation in your area also. I just have never heard back from Far Northern Regional Center. Maybe it's because COVID was going on and everything, but I know there's a DDAR that serves your area, and I'd be happy to help you if they aren't able to.
Yeah, have you connected with the program in Trinity County?
Far Northern? I went
No.
there in
With the current program that is in Trinity?
the DDAR program. Which
No,
which
the program
program?
that supports people with disabilities.
There's several. I'm not sure which program you're referring to.
Hey, Dawn,
What-
can I clarify? You know,
Sure.
your DDAR program is located in many centers around the state. So
Yeah.
if you could put a link or a phone number to call if somebody's wanting help with their individual planning, who would they call to find out who could help them?
Their local independent living center.
And do they all have DDAR? Projects?
Most of them do. There's a couple of them that no longer do the DDAR program, but most of them do.
Okay, so if people don't know what their local center is, who should they call?
Yeah, this is Anthony. I'm gonna jump right in because
There you go. Thanks, Anthony's got this.
I program coordinate for the DDAR program. So Disability Disaster Resources and Access has a website. I'm gonna put it in the chat. You can type in, let me see. You can press the county that you are in, and it will directly locate you to the center that has those different resources. And here is the link in the chat now. There's also an application on the website for you to apply for, either batteries or, like Don was saying, different services like emergency planning if you don't have that in place, and of course assistance with any type of public assistance. So check out that website, and there's not necessarily a number to call until you reach that center, and you've pressed the county that you're in, and then it relocates you to that center, and then you call that center. 21 out of the 28 independent living centers across California has the DDAR program in them. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Anthony. Are there other hands up? Questions?
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. I'm Heather Iger. I interned with Bay Area Urban Area Security Initiative, and I've lived through a number of emergencies myself personally as a disabled person, and I wanted to pipe in again that one of the things that I found profoundly helpful during the pandemic was disaster funds. And one of the things that I find incredibly challenging is that we are penalized when we hold on to any additional money with all of our services. And this continues to be a tremendous challenge. I want to keep a little bit of money in hand so that services that I find lacking, like whether it's I can't get out of bed that day and I need to hire someone to come help me clean my house, or I can't get services to shuttle my daughter from one place to another because they provide disability transportation for me, but not my daughter. These little things that these, rigid stipulations for services can be really, really a problem. And being able to hang on to a little bit of money, emergency funds, for when these things break down is an issue. And if someone could advocate for an allowance of emergency funds that doesn't hurt us, that would be so huge. That's all.
Good point. Shaylin, Germán?
So, and I would definitely suggest you check in with a benefits consultant in your area. But depending on the social service that you may be using, if it's subsidized housing, a waiver for some type of personal type of support, whatever it may be, service provided by Medicaid, for example. There is a type of savings account not related to the ABLE, which I'll talk separately, and there's should be about $7,000-8,000 that you can have in this type of account that should not impact your benefits. But I definitely check in with your, with a local benefits counselor. Because there's a limit on your income and there's a limit on your type of savings that you can have. And it should be up. I mean, there's in the bigger schemes, $8,000 it's not a lot, but it's something to begin with that should not affect your services.
$8,000 would be huge. I mean, that would be a significant difference to me, but I've been unable to, with all the benefits counseling that I've received, I've been unable to find anything which won't hurt me with $1,000. And I'm fully government funded on every program you can think of.
We put our email in the chat. I would definitely reach out so we could, have a more one-on-one conversation, because there's something missing there. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd greatly appreciate it.
Of course. And I myself have been in different types of waiver services since 2002, in multiple places, not in California, but that's much more progressive than many other areas. So we can figure this out. Then separately, there is the ABLE account, which is a federal allotment that allows people that acquire the disabilities before the age of 26 to have a type of account that won't impact services. Again, check in with a benefits consultant and ask them about the ABLE account for people with disabilities, and that's a whole other area. Lastly, if people are seeking employment, and there's so many issues with seeking employment as a person with disabilities. If your, health may need more attention than not only in services. So if you're Medicaid or Medicare and you need services, but you're afraid of losing Medicaid or Medicare because you don't know if your work will keep you for the length of time that you need, and what if it drops you? Many states offer a Medicaid for workers with disabilities programs, which is a different type of waiver. Many states don't talk about it, but California has a similar program. And that's another option for those people, such areas.
There are two items in chat. One is you can always call 211 to find out your local center somewhere in California. And there is a question from San Diego Nadine that says, we don't have a DESIRE program here. Who would we refer to for help with emergency planning, for individual emergency planning? Well, I would, Anthony, I'd give to you, but I would say, maybe the closest nearby center that has a program should be able to help an individual. Am I stepping beyond the boundary here, Anthony, or what?
No, thank you, June. I can jump in. Yeah, Nadine, we previously did not cover the San Diego County, but with more ILCs joining the DDAR program, SCIL is joining as a DDAR, and they are covering the San Diego County, and I can put their information in the chat for you right now.
And Ron put up a map with a link regarding the coverage and contacts. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. And yes, we are still in the process of updating that as well with the 2 new centers that have just joined us.
Zach talked about the importance of an emergency kit in chat and a go kit, but just a reminder, sometimes if there's shelter in place, so also think about what you would need to be able to survive well in place for a week sometimes. 72 hours is kind of the old way, but sometimes it's I like to say yo-yo. You're on your own. Sometimes it could be a week.
I mean, we let's not forget that early on in the pandemic, people were being recommended to immediately quarantine for 2 weeks if they showed symptoms. And what social supports, how many people have a fridge that is ready for 2 weeks stay?
You know, Herman, Shaylin, June, I'm thinking of something we need to think more about, which is we talk a lot about the community doing exercises and drills, but we don't talk about ourselves doing our own drills to develop our own muscle memory. So I have a few drills I've been working on. One is, who is my helper list? How far away are they? How long would it take for them to get to me in minutes, not hours? That's one, I call it my mind drills. Another mind drill is I have 5 minutes to leave the house because of a fast moving fire. I have 5 minutes. What do I grab and go in 5 minutes? So I do a mind drill. I make a list. It's like, and then think, what did I forget? And what if I put my phone somewhere else, which I often do, instead of in a consistent place or my wallet or whatever. So it really is also holding me responsible for developing my own muscle memory. Well, so anyway.
Yeah, well, June, and building on the conversation with Cindy, we do encourage and practice with different groups this concept of it is at every individual building a culture of preparedness, and surely not only the conversations and mental exercises and drills, if you will. That's the first stage. Then you have to practice that, and everyone, setting a time every few months, a couple of times a year, like when those have friends with children, or those of you that are parents, you set up an event day to go out to the park. It's a whole day. You prepare for it. Make the drill day a weekend. We're gonna get up one day and we're gonna try everything that we've talked about. How long did it take you, June? 5 minutes to get out of there? Are you out in the street in 5 minutes? Do you know that? So I would then that's like the 2.0 of this exercise.
Great point. Hey, Ron, go ahead.
Thanks, June. And you guys are great. It's like I heard you when you spoke over in Colorado for the AFN National Group, and keep up the good work. That's number one. I want to find out, is there any standard training, especially working with your neighbors? It's like, I know we have a Map My Neighborhood that we've kind of tailored, but something more specific for the AFN community. And if there is, I would love to get an outline of it, or if you guys develop it, we love to be part of it as well. But yeah, if there's just something a more standardized, something that we can build upon.
It's a great idea, Ron. It's something that we've been internally over everything we're doing, wanting to build. Because when we speak about the access and functional needs community, pregnant people is part of this community, right? Homeless people is part of this community. So we surely think about people with disabilities, older adults, children, but the gamut of the community, people with limited English proficiency. So as you say, Ron, it's a compendium that we need to put together. So if you could put your email in the chat, or if not, I'll make sure I connect with June. Through June.
Yeah, no, it's like, anytime we can hook up, I think the more voices that are in it, I mean, we're talking about also language barriers for a lot of people. How do we reach them? And there's just, once we start getting out of our silos, I really think that we can benefit. And, I did a training before where I was telling people, it's like, yeah, just list out all the people, all the names. And they're like, why are we doing this? It's like, you'll stop, and I give them a minute. And then after the minute, I'm like, okay, those are your contacts that you're going to reach out to that are going to be your trusted allies. After that, I had one lady come up to me and she said, I don't have anybody. And I had a really puzzled look on my face. I'm like, really? Where do you live? And she's like, oh, I live in Oakland. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know there was any homesteads out there. And she's laughing at me like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, you have neighbors, don't you? And she's like, well, yeah, I do, but I don't talk to them. So, anything that you guys can come up with, or we'd love to be a part of it as well. Please let us know, but I'll put my email in there as well. Thank you guys. Keep up the great work.
Much appreciated. Feels us.
Hey, Ron, I think we need to, in Herman, Shaylin, I think we need to reactivate the, and Todd, reactivate the map your neighborhood or map your apartment floor, or, how do you even get to know your neighbors in today's world of not often knowing your neighbors, and how critical that really is, because it's widely known and not widely reinforced that in these big emergencies, they are your responders. They are your first responders, and maybe so for quite a while. Ron, your hand's still up or no?
Sorry, I just wanted to show it. I still have my little map, my neighborhood CD.
Oh.
And so June, anytime you want to hook up, we can definitely share this one. Love to do that.
How does everyone get a hold of those, or is it out of print?
This is out of print. This is way back when. I think this one came from Washington, where it was developed. And then it got over to me over in San Francisco, and I've held on to it for the last 20 or 10 years.
Well, I do know that if you search for Map Your Neighborhood online, there are still a lot of tools that do come up. And frankly, for those of you who don't know what that means, I mean, to me, the crux of it is getting to know your neighbors and who's got what resources and what skills. For example, with power outages, I recently did a Google Earth to see who in my neighborhood actually has solar power. So somebody was really life dependent on power. Who should we network with in terms of a potential source of power that we should go meet and talk to? And I found this huge apartment building a block away with huge solar panels on it just by looking at Google Earth. So just one example. And we have about, we still have about 10 minutes, but Anthony put the poll up, so at your convenience, please urge you to respond to the poll. and it's got about 3 or 4 questions on it. So other questions, concerns?
We'll cover a couple more points as colleagues think through thoughts. Early on, I mentioned that while we were deploying Puerto Rico, not only responding to hundreds of people with disabilities and their families with immediate aid, water, food, disability-related resources, and aid, we saw hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans, U.S. citizens, relocate to different mainland states, and their Medicaid not crossing over with them. So Medicaid, our health care, the CHIP program for children, and our long-term services and supports paid by Medicaid do not cross over with you across state lines. There's a fire, you have to go to Nevada, any other state, Medicaid, you have to restart that all over again. And we know that can take months, if not years. We developed in 2018 and 19 two pieces of legislation. One, the Disaster Relief Medicaid Act. It was just reintroduced by the second time by your California Congressman Panetta, and it will make Medicaid follow the person in a presidential declared disaster. If you're in California and you have to relocate to New Mexico, a lot of the services that you can receive in California are not currently in New Mexico, right? We know this. The RMA will allow it for the host state to provide all the services provided in your home state, and HHS will be supporting that new state with making sure that they have the systems to provide everything you need, and we're receiving in an expedited fashion with no recertification. And at the state level, they will be federally matched for that Medicaid program. So the FMAP match will be at 100% for Medicaid, the FMAP match for 2 years after the presidential declared disaster in the affected state and those hosting states, which will greatly limit that there's California has a California has a very low FMAP match because California puts in a lot. I think sometimes up to 60%. This would a lot for big budget reunification and balancing. It will also, to David's point, it will create a pilot program for an emergency personal assistance response corps. It will be a pilot program for 5 states to implement the pilot to create a personal assistance response corps, a group ready to provide assistance when, what if my personal assistance provider nearby is also in the disaster? They have to deal with their own issues for a moment, and having a response corps ready, prepared, and educated will be critical. That is the RMA. We also, it's accompanied by the READY Act.
And READY is REAADI, the Ready for Disasters Act, which stands for the Real Emergency Access for Aging and Disability Inclusion, Ready for Disasters Act.
READY is in its third iteration, and over a year with Marcy, June, hundreds of advocates. These 2 bills were developed with much community input, following a since invalid methodology of equity and justice. The READY will create a disability-led and disasters national project of the significance focused on people with disabilities and disasters. It will create 10 disability and disasters technical and training centers across the country in 10 regions, in all the regions, and separately disability and disaster research centers. So the research doesn't have to take too much of the training and technical hands-on assistance. And all these bodies are to be built by following the Center for Independent Living disability-led 51% larger staffing and leadership. It would also amend the Stafford Act, which is the legislation that allots for response FEMA funds to acknowledge disability-led organizations, specifically naming Centers for Independent Living as private nonprofit status, so they can be directly reimbursed and not have to go through every disaster, providing services in disasters and not being reimbursed for this.
And just point of clarity, you may say, my still is a nonprofit, but in terms of this policy under the program and policy guide through FEMA's Public Assistance Fund, they have a list of eligible private nonprofits, and we've seen a lot of barriers in Centers for Independent Living trying to access that.
While they are responding each and every time in their localities. It will have the governmental
Accountability Office
do an analysis of mismanagement of funds, disaster-related funds, with a lens of people with disabilities. Back to Hurricane Katrina. We believe that this piece of legislation will begin to create a leveling playing field for the disability community and the emergency management nationwide. We at the partnership, along you all, we have to be, and June has been at this for 3 decades at least, pitching at it, hitting it at every little angle. This would change and flip the paradigm. You will find more information about both bills on ready.com, reaadi.com. And in the coming weeks, we'll be able to share with you all an email that will come probably from June that will allow you to put your zip code and easily email your congressperson and educate them on the need for this piece of legislation. And all the things that we've talked about are also services that we come with to groups and provide trainings on, accessible virtually with ADAG guidelines and WCAG guidelines on accessibility for web. You will find more information on that on our website and our service catalog. June?
Well, thank you. Thank you both for a very rich and really diverse, far-reaching conversation. There are so many things that we need to unpeel and go deep on. And that's some of what we do on those daily calls and your Tuesday call as well at noon Pacific. But thank you for this overview. And you all need to recognize that partnership is truly a partnership, which means we don't have to just do this alone in California. We need to do this with our national colleagues and international colleagues from every corner of the universe and the U.S. So thank you for the value of your time, and really appreciate it. Glad you're there, and we've got everything you need to access from the resources of the partnership in chat. So just a reminder for you all on Zoom who want to save chat, I think if you click the 3 buttons at the bottom of the chat, it says save chat. Yep. And that allows you to save chat on your own computer, because there's a lot of rich info right there in chat. So again, thank you both. Give you back 2 minutes of your time, but just remember, those of you who got distracted by such good information, I think the poll is still up, so give us your feedback. And again, a great big thank you to both of you, and we'll talk to you next month. So,
thanks so much, June, and thanks everyone.
Elliot, email us.
I just put something into the chat. There's an opportunity for open comment to National Council on Disabilities in just about a half an hour, where a lot of these things that we're talking about can be raised to the highest levels of government. So I just put the information in the chat. Shaylin and Germain, I emailed you earlier. If you can push that out immediately, that would be great. Because I think that there's a great opportunity here to put these things on the formal government record.
This is Germán. Yes, Elliot, this actually came out from NCD, National Council of Disability, yesterday afternoon. We've made note to them that was too short of a notice for the community over, nationwide. If you join, you will see our colleague Priya Penner, who will give the presentation the comments for the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. And we have asked NCD already to have another session such as this, because they recognize themselves to us personally that they did not get enough participants, and we reminded them less than a 24-hour notice. This won't be enough. Great.
I completely understand, but if anyone as an individual would like to put some comments on the official public record about all the things we're talking about here, how to improve emergency management, disaster response, recovery for people with disabilities, this is an open forum to do that.
Thanks so much, Elliot.
We did let her know, but yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot. Thanks
And
to
I
all.
completely understand what you guys are saying and definitely agree. And had it been my authority to send it to you earlier, I would have.
No worries, Elliot. We're in direct communications with colleagues there, and there the partnership will have a representation, and we shared it with our colleagues yesterday.
Thanks.
Thanks
Right.
again, you two. Talk next month and talk to you both sooner than that.
Thanks,